Ever since I watched the teaser trailer for the upcoming Masters of the Universe movie, I couldn't help but be excited about He-Man once again. I mean, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was one of my favorite cartoons growing up. I'm talking about the 1983 Filmation series that I'm pretty sure if you're watching this video, some of you may have watched during its original run, and have some really fond memories of the show. I know, right? Those were the good old days. Now, I know a lot of us would like to take a trip down memory lane, so I've picked 10 of the best He-Man and the Masters of the Universe episodes that you could rewatch today. By the way, my name is Ben Bruner, and without further ado, let's dive right in. The Cosmic Comet. This one is one of my favorite episodes and one that I feel is worth rewatching. Now, before I tell you the episode's plot, here's an interesting fact. Despite being the 20th episode, The Cosmic Comet was the first He-Man and the Masters of the Universe script commissioned, and this episode was written by Tom Ruegger and Larry DiTillio, and directed by Steve Clark. Now, let's see what happens in this episode. Evil Lyn and Beastman are looking at a comet that is looming over Castle Grayskull. They're thrown away by He-Man, but the Sorceress appears and tells him that there's a bigger threat. Skeletor is planning to use the Cosmic Comet to destroy Eternia, and the only one who can help them is an old wizard named Zagraz. So, He-Man and his heroic warriors, Teela, Man-at-Arms, Cringer, and Orko, head to Mount Zagraz to try and convince the old wizard, who seems to have lost his mojo ever since he made a mistake while trying to control the two cosmic comets, which ended up destroying one and turning the other into a lonely, evil comet. Meanwhile, Skeletor, Evil Lyn, and Beastman combine their evil energies, and Skeletor gains power over the wandering comet. Zagraz is initially hesitant about his magic, since he feels he is too old and weak and can no longer control the cosmic comet. But when the time comes, he tells He-Man and the Masters of the Universe to combine the good in them to cancel out the evil in the cosmic comet. This goodness manifests into another cosmic comet, which joins the evil cosmic comet, and the two cosmic comets are now free from Skeletor's influence. In the end, everyone is safe, and as with all episodes, we get a moral of the story at the end, where Man-at-Arms tells us that just like Zagraz, we all make mistakes, but we should never give up, and tells us to remain confident because, as the saying goes, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Disappearing Act. Up next, we have Disappearing Act, which was directed by Lou Zukor and written by David Chapp, a man whose script Gale Force started the bidding wars of the late 80s. So it's not surprising that this was a really memorable episode, and here's what happens. Orko, as always, is up to something, and he accidentally hits Prince Adam's aka He-Man's Sword of Power with his magical sword, making it disappear. Meanwhile, Skeletor arrives at the Royal Palace using a disappearing helmet that makes him invisible, and captures Prince Adam, hoping that He-Man would come to rescue him. He puts Adam in a cave behind laser bars. Now, you and I know that without his magical sword, Prince Adam cannot become He-Man, so Skeletor waits. The Sorceress tells Orko and Man-at-Arms that He-Man's sword has been sent into the past and opens a portal to the past, and asks Orko and Cringer to retrieve the sword. Orko and Cringer find a giant playing with the sword, and are successful in retrieving it from the giant and escaping from all the other monsters in the past. Meanwhile, the Sorceress had tasked Man-at-Arms with making a robot that looks like He-Man to trick Skeletor into believing He-Man has arrived. Prince Adam uses Man-at-Arms' beeper to summon Stratos, who goes back to Man-at-Arms, Orko, and Cringer and tells them about Adam's whereabouts. And just as Skeletor and Beastman are distracted by robot He-Man in the attack track, Man-at-Arms, Orko, and Cringer arrive at the cave where Adam is kept, and Orko hands over the sword to Prince Adam by squeezing through the laser bars. Adam finds the sword, and behold, by the power of Grayskull, I have the power.
The power of Grayskull!
And we all know He-Man is the most powerful man in the universe, and there's no way Skeletor can defeat him. But this time he doesn't use his muscle power. He uses his brain power to capture Skeletor, who disappeared using the disappearing helmet, and destroys the disappearing helmet. At the end of the episode, Man-at-Arms tells us that being the most powerful man in the universe isn't the only thing that makes He-Man such a great hero. He tells us that in this story, He-Man used something more powerful than his muscles. Any guesses? Well, I gave you a hint. Teela's Quest. Written by Paul Dini and directed by Marsh Lamore, Teela's Quest is the second He-Man and the Masters of the Universe episode, and this episode is particularly special because in this episode, we learn a great secret about Teela's past. So the episode starts with Queen Marlena using Man-at-Arm's memory projector to show her son Prince Adam her past, about how she was an astronaut from Earth who crash-landed on Eternia. Teela walks in and she grows intrigued to find out about her past, particularly her real mother. The memory projector shows her memories of Man-at-Arms, who is her guardian who took care of her ever since she was a little girl, but it doesn't reveal anything about her mother. The only way she could find out is for her to go to the Oracle of Crystal Sea, which is a very dangerous place filled with shadow monsters. Teela rushes to Crystal Sea by informing Orko to keep it a secret, but Orko isn't too good at keeping secrets, is he? He tells He-Man and Cringer, who follow Teela to the Crystal Sea. Meanwhile, Teela arrives at Crystal Sea, fights off the shadow monsters using a bright light, and even talks to the Oracle, which tells her that long ago, Man-at-Arms was drawn telepathically towards a mountain while he was walking in the woods. He saw that Merman and his subjects were climbing the mountain, trying to take something from a falcon's nest, but the Oracle senses an evil presence and stops revealing further. That evil presence is Merman, who knew Teela was headed to Crystal Sea and wanted to use her as a revenge for what Man-at-Arms did to him when he wanted to steal the falcon's nest. Meanwhile, Orko goes to the Sorceress and tells her about Teela's quest, so she heads to be on Teela's side, and when He-Man and Battle-Cat finally arrive at the Oracle's cave, he tells them that Merman has taken Teela. You see, Merman wants to give Teela as a sacrifice to a legendary sea demon called Bakul, who rises every 20 years from its slumber. But before he could do that, He-Man arrives and thwarts his plans. Meanwhile, Teela and He-Man get back to the Oracle, who reveals the remaining story about Teela's past. He tells us that the thing in Falcon's best interest, which the Falcon was saving with her life, was baby Teela, and that the Falcon was actually Sorceress and that Teela was her daughter, whom she gave to Man-at-Arms, thinking he would protect her, just as he did. In the end, Teela tells us that adopted parents who love and care are just as good as biological parents, and that caring parents who adopt deserve the same love as those who give birth. Evil Seed, Season 1, Episode 59. Do you think Skeletor would ever team up with He-Man? Well, in the Season 1 episode titled Evil Seed, written by Barney Cohen and directed by Bob Arkwright, he does. As strange as it might sound, Eternia is being taken over by weeds. Yes, there's plants growing wild all over Eternia, which causes trouble not just to the inhabitants of the Royal Palace, but also to those at Snake Mountain. First, we see a dam collapse, which causes water to flood and damage to crops and people. Man-at-Arms and He-Man reach and fix the dam by breaking a mountain and sealing the crack with stones. The farmers tell them that they were given some magical seeds by a man wearing a black hood. That man is a plant-like villain called Evil Seed, the evil master of the plants. Evil Seed's seeds grow into vines that take over the land, including the Royal Palace, and capture King Randor, Queen Marlena, Teela, Orko, and Man-at-Arms. The Sorceress does some research on the vines and tells He-Man that they might be able to defeat Evil Seed by making it snow over Eternia, so He-Man goes to get a huge mountain of ice, but the Sorceress warns him their powers might not be enough and that they may need Skeletor's help. When they contact Skeletor, they find out that he's also fed up with the unwanted infestation. Skeletor's hesitant to help initially, but agrees when the creepers take Evil Lyn and Trapjaw away. He-Man breaks the ice mountain and tosses it toward Grayskull, and he, the Sorceress, Skeletor, and Orko join their energies together and break the giant iceberg and make it snow over Eternia, which withers Evil Seed and his creepers. Toward the end of the episode, Teela tells us the moral of the story, suggesting that we need to work together because teamwork makes a job easier, and even if working with others feels difficult at first, we will be surprised by the results and we might learn something new. The Dragon's Gift. The Dragon's Gift is another episode which I think is worth rewatching. This episode is written by Larry DiTilio and directed by Lou Zukor, and begins inside the Royal Palace where Skeletor arrives at the Royal Palace disguised as Ambassador Theron from the Kingdom of Eastfen, and pretends to bring a gift, a jade bust of King Randor for the king, but Man-at-Arms finds something fishy about the imposter and his gift and tries to stop the king from accepting it. That's when Skeletor reveals reveals himself and casts a spell that turns Man-at-Arms into a crystal statue. Teela tries to fight Skeletor, and Adam and Cringer find a safe place and turn into He-Man and Battle-Cat, but Skeletor escapes. So He-Man and Teela go to the Castle Grayskull and ask the Sorceress to reverse the spell, but she reveals that this magic is beyond her power to reverse, and tells them that the only one who can do that is a great wise dragon named Granomir, although she doesn't tell them where they could find him because she's promised not to reveal his whereabouts to anyone, and tells them to find it using human knowledge. So He-Man and Teela read books, which if you look at them closely are all blank, a common cost-cutting practice in animation of the time. He-Man finds out that the ice trolls are friends with dragons, so Granomir could be in the Ice Mountains. They head to the Ice Mountains to seek Granomir while battling the trolls and other polar creatures. When they finally arrive at Darksmoke, the rather overconfident and proud dragon, who by the way is 10,000 years old and knows all the magic in the world, tells them he can't help them because he doesn't like humans because they are ungrateful and ugly. However, the powerful dragon agrees to help on one condition. He-Man and Teela should bring him a gift, that gift being the Sky Tree, which is the oldest living creature in the world, older than Granomir himself. He tells them where to find it, but when He-Man and Teela talk to the Sky Tree, who talks rather philosophically, they have a change of heart and return to Granomir without his gift. He-Man tells him that he cannot hurt a life to save another life. Granomir likes He-Man's kindness and gives them a book of spells which can help restore Man-at-Arms, which they manage to do. And as usual, we get a moral of the story where Teela tells us to respect all living things, including trees, even if they don't talk like the Sky Tree. Origin of the Sorceress. As you may have already guessed by the name of this episode, it talks about how the Sorceress became the mystic guardian of Grayskull. The episode starts with Orko and He-Man waiting for Man-at-Arms, who's been working at his lab for days making something very special. Man-at-Arms finally reveals his latest invention, a robotic horse called Stridor, which will be the perfect companion for He-Man, and just then a wheel of fire appears in the sky and starts throwing hot stones over the royal palace. The Sorceress appears and tells He-Man that she knows what it is and asks him to come to Castle Grayskull alone to learn more about it. He-Man goes there and the Sorceress tells him that the fire wheel was a sign of the return of an ancient evil wizard called Morgoth the Terrible, and that they should journey to Dark Mountain to seek him. When they reach the Dark Mountain and wait till dawn for Morgoth to show up, she tells He-Man the story of her past as a mortal woman called Teela Na, and how Morgoth's greed invited trouble on the people of Noella, and how Teela Na learned about the Castle of Grayskull, and how she relinquished her mortal life to become the immortal Sorceress. Meanwhile, Morgoth appears at Dark Mountain and seeks to re-emerge from his confinement. However, with Stridor's help, He-Man is able to thwart Morgoth's plans, and the Sorceress sends him back to the Void. In this episode, written by J. Michael Straczynski and directed by Mar Lamore, He-Man himself tells the moral of the episode and tells us to help fellow humans who are in need and when they see a problem too big for them. Oh, and let me tell you an interesting trivia about this episode. In this episode, the Sorceress becomes the protector of two Swords of Power. One belongs to He-Man and the other one eventually becomes the Sword of Princess Adora, aka She-Ra. To save Skeletor. It's pretty rare for He-Man and Skeletor to join forces against something. I mean, we've seen that happen before, like in the Evil Seed episode. This episode is almost the same except that it's He-Man and his heroic warriors saving Skeletor and his evil warriors from a hideous one-eyed blob alien monster called Shigora, which Skeletor conjured from a little-known dimension beyond space. An injured Whiplash, one of Skeletor's minions, arrives at the royal palace to meet King Randor to tell him about the monster who appeared in Snake Mountain, all thanks to Skeletor's magic spell. But the conjuring didn't go as Skeletor would have wanted, as Shigora doesn't listen to anyone and overcomes Skeletor and his evil warriors, Evil Lyn, Trapjaw, and Whiplash, and is on its way to Castle Grayskull, seeking to unlock its power and destroy all of Eternia and take it to its dimension. At first, everybody, including Prince Adam, aka He-Man, thinks this could be one of Skeletor's tricks, but the Sorceress tells him that Whiplash is telling the truth and that he must combine the forces of good and evil to destroy the monsters. So Prince Adam calls for the power of Grayskull and turns into He-Man, and he, along with Man-at-Arms, Teela, Battle-Cat, Orko, and Fisto, go with Whiplash to the Snake Mountain, where they find Skeletor, Evil Lyn, and Trapjaw turned into crystals, and Shigora sapping their powers. He-Man and his heroic warriors help free Skeletor and his evil warriors and fight off Shigora's bat-like creatures. He-Man asks Skeletor to join forces with him, and Skeletor agrees. Meanwhile, Shigora heads to Castle Grayskull and gains control over Sorceress, whom he turns into an evil version that attacks He-Man and his comrades. But Evil Lyn is able to break Shigora's spell on her. He-Man and his heroic warriors work together with Skeletor and his evil army to defeat the alien demon and send him flying through space before he could create his corridor to take Eternia to his dimension. Meanwhile, after Shigora is sent back to his dimension, Skeletor immediately turns on He-Man, but He-Man outsmarts him by trapping him and his crew in a portal back to Snake Mountain. And I like how the episode writers Paul Dini and Beth Bornstein used Fisto, someone who has a giant iron hand, to say the moral of the day, where he tells us to lend a hand whenever someone asks for help, even if our hand may not be as big as his. The Rainbow Warrior. If you think He-Man, Teela, and Man-at-Arms are the only ones capable of defeating Skeletor, think again. Because in this episode, written by Bob Forward and Leslie Wilson, Skeletor is losing his patience and wants to conquer Eternia. But when Trapjaw and Beastman hint that he needs an army to defeat He-Man, Skeletor says he's not sure if he can do it with his dimwit minions and fleet of robot guards, and decides to capture the royal family, King Randor, Prince Adam, Man-at-Arms, and Teela, who are picnicking on a beach after a jousting game, which Teela lost by being too careless. Skeletor thinks that the Royal Guard will be vulnerable without its leaders, and thus he can attack the Royal Palace and proceed with his conquest of Castle Grayskull. Meanwhile, Queen Marlena, who is reminded of her past as a pilot, decides to stay and reminisce some of her old memories with her ship, the Rainbow Explorer, which has been restored by Man-at-Arms and kept in the Royal Museum. She recollects how she was struck by meteors while on a space mission, and how she crash-landed on Eternia and met King Randor, and eventually became his queen. When the lieutenant of the Royal Guards tells her that Skeletor's captured her family and held them prisoner, Queen Marlena decides to take charge and leads the guard against Skeletor and his evil army, and proves she's still got the great piloting skills as she uses the Rainbow Explorer to rescue her family. One thing worth noticing in this episode is Marlena frees Prince Adam first and not anybody else, as if she knows her son is He-Man and that he will help the others. So Adam goes to a safe place and calls on the power of Grayskull and holds aloft his sword of power and becomes He-Man. And another thing I noticed in this episode is there's no Cringer or Battle Cat to be seen. While Marlena takes on the Skeletor's flying fleet and pulls an amazing aerobatic maneuver on Skeletor's collector and sends it crashing down. Everyone is impressed by the Rainbow Explorer and wonders who the pilot could be, and King Randor reveals that she's Marlena, the best pilot in all Eternia. And although there's no moral of the story here, Teela and Queen Marlena tell us, rather implicitly, that sometimes young people should learn from the old-timers, and vice versa. Hunt for He-Man. In this episode, written by Antoni Zalewski and directed by Marsh Lamore, we see He-Man grow weak and vulnerable after falling into a pit of poisonous water while flying in Man-at-Arms' latest invention, a Wind Raider with autopilot function. So, how did the Wind Raider fall? Well, Skeletor's minions, Trapjaw and Whiplash, are watching the self-driving plane and grow curious, and so does Skeletor, who wants to add this new Wind Raider to his fleet. So he tells them to freeze it, and Whiplash meddles with the ray machine, which sends the Wind Raider with Adam and Cringer riding in the back seat, crashing down on the swamps in Skeletor's territory. When they fall, Cringer's tail gets trapped in the plane, and he drowns, and Adam becomes He-Man and dives to save his pet. But he starts feeling weak and decides to take a rest near a tree trap set by an old man and his grandson. When the boy, Drac, and his grandpa find He-Man, the old man tells He-Man that he must have drank some of that poisonous swamp water, which is making him weak, and decided to help He-Man recover. But the young boy wants to hand He-Man over to Skeletor in exchange for money and power. However, the old man tells him that Skeletor is evil, and no good ever comes from evil, and they all carry the weakened He-Man in a cart to take him to the healing tree in the swamp village. Meanwhile, Skeletor arrives and sends his hunter robots and Trapjaw and Whiplash behind them, while he destroys the swamp village and captures the swamp people to work at his mines. The robot hunters chase Cringer, but fall when a bridge collapses, and He-Man, Cringer, the Old Man, and Drac arrive at the village where they find the huts burned and people absconding. And Drac understands what his grandpa meant when he said Skeletor is evil. So, he plays a trick with Skeletor to buy some time for He-Man to heal at the healing tree. And He-Man recovers and defeats Skeletor and frees all the imprisoned villagers, and He-Man, Cringer, and Drac tell us that having friends you can count on is more important than having money and power. The problem with power. Last but not least, I think the Season 2 episode titled The Problem with Power, written by Bob Forward and Leslie Wilson, and directed by Gwen Wetzler, is worth watching because it's really interesting. I mean, Skeletor summons the Goblin General Tatarin to Snake Mountain, and the two villains have a common goal, defeating He-Man. So Skeletor seeks Tatarin's help in tricking He-Man to give up his Sword of Power and give up being He-Man altogether. How does he plan to do that? Well, Skeletor and General Tatarin construct a giant dimensional gateway in a peaceful village called Village of Zack, where he's using the villagers to build the gate. When Man-at-Arms tells King Randor about this, he sends him and Adam/He-Man to investigate, while suspecting that Skeletor's plans have never been so explicit. When He-Man, Man-at-Arms, and Orko arrive at the village, Skeletor, with the aid of Taratan, plays a trick on He-Man, which has him believing he has killed one of the villagers, who is in fact Taratan in disguise. He-Man thinks he has broken the promise of protecting all innocents and that he no longer deserves the power he holds, so he throws the sword in the bottomless abyss and gives up being He-Man by holding up the power sword and proclaiming, "Let the power return." However, Orko overhears Skeletor and Taratan's plot, but gets captured and imprisoned before he could tell He-Man that it was all Skeletor's trick. Meanwhile, as He-Man struggles with the consequences of his actions and starts living as Prince Adam, trouble grows as Skeletor's dimensional gateway is almost ready. With no Sword of Power, there's obviously no He-Man, so Teela takes up the responsibility to destroy the dimensional gateway, which is being used to bring Taratan's goblins to Eternia. She reaches the village and intentionally gets captured and brought before Skeletor and Taratan, who are overseeing the gate. Skeletor is happy to see that she has turned herself in, but she threatens to destroy the gate using a mesotronic bomb. Skeletor attacks Teela with a ray from his Havoc Staff. Meanwhile, Orko escapes from Skeletor's magic-proof prison and informs Adam about Skeletor's trick. Adam goes to retrieve the sword and becomes He-Man once again, and arrives just in time to save Teela and destroy the gate, which sends all the goblins, including Taratan, back to the dimension where they came from. The episode ends with He-Man carrying Teela off into the sunset, despite her telling him she could walk. And yes, there's the moral for the day, with Man-at-Arms giving us a lesson in safety, specifically to wear a seatbelt and not play with matches, because it's better to be safe than sorry. So there you have it, my picks for the 10 best rewatchable He-Man and the Masters of the Universe episodes. What do you think of this list? Do you have any episodes that you find memorable and worth rewatching? Share your thoughts and suggestions in the comments. Until next time!